The Summons Handbleceyiya. Long after sundown, during the last of the cold moons, Swift Medicine rose straight from his warm buffalo robes. His hearing still as sharp as it had been years ago, he closed his eyes and listened. Yes, the chilling hoot came again, wending through the clear air of the winter encampment. He half expected to see a vision of Hinhankara, the old woman, owl-maker, who led those who had followed a good path toward the land of many fine lodges up into the heavens. For he had a peace that he would be one of those who were allowed to stay on the path, not tossed into the abyss by her. Glancing at the sleeping forms of his wives, allowing his eyes to roam the faint interior, he saw nothing to indicate that he was in the dreaming world. Yet the flap to his lodge was open, as it should not have been, but nothing was amiss. He did not hear a single sound except the very slight soughing sound of the coals settling down into ash. Moonlight filled the doorway, so beautiful, as full of silver as the glinting of the summer sun on water, but oddly it held no glare. He found himself standing, no chill upon his bare skin, no ache in his old bones. He was entranced. Yes, this strange moonlight was beckoning him to enter its mysterious gleam. He felt nothing amiss, even though this was a time of darkness for the moon. Not hesitating to explore, as though he were but a young man of but a few winters, a small pleasure filled him at the strangeness that was surrounding him now. He was still a warrior, after all. Exiting naked from the tent, there on the side of the icy stream stood a snow-white buffalo calf, perfectly formed, its breath rising into luminous silver trails upon the night air. Once he met its gaze, it turned north and strode along the bank, heading toward a strand of aspen around the bend by the horse herd. As he followed, an excitement built in him. So long it had been since he had a vision. No matter how fast he trod, bare feet dancing on bare snow, he could not close the gap between them. At the base of a large cottonwood it knelt and turned once more toward him. It stood transfixed. He stood transfixed, expectant, reverent, waiting for the message of great significance. How long he stood he had no idea. The stars above revolved in their timeless gyre, or perhaps he only blinked, but once before the creature nodded its pure white head, then simply disappeared, just a faint mist dissolving into the night. "Wait!" he called out, desperate to know what this apparition intended. He raced to the exact spot to find that the snow held only a small declivity where warmth had melted from 4 hooves, only that. He woke to a disheveled, sleeping foxwoman looking quizzically into his face. "You shouted out in your sleep." "What?" "Wait." "I believe you were calling," over and over. Disgruntled, he pulled himself up, pulling a thick winter buffalo robe around his shoulders, for a great chill had come suddenly upon him as he stepped out into the dark, moonless night. From the faint stirring of the birds he knew that the sun would soon rise, but now he would barely discern the circle of lodges spread around him. Though he could hear the running of the stream, he could not see even a glimmer of light reflecting off its surface. Making his way swiftly through the sleeping village, the dogs merely grumbled, his scent a familiar one. Which tree had it been? There, the largest of the cottonwoods raised its skeletal arms to the still pulsing stars. Why do the stars appear at their brightest when one is alone, he mused, as he searched the snow-covered grounds for tracks. Not finding any, he knelt in the slight depression beneath the tree. In the middle lay a large feather, one meant for flight, with that little downy tuft at its base to dull the sound from the wings. One pure white owl's primary. Leaping to his feet as if arrow struck, "Ha!" he exclaimed. That swift movement and sound caused the nearby herd to stir. A soft call of alarm rose from one of the boys that were guarding them. Seizing the feather, he simultaneously called out before his presence here would be violently challenged, for running toward him, arrow-nocked, was the one called the Cottonwood Boy. As soon as the village was awake, he sought out Black Cloud, another bear dreamer, as himself. Passing the pipe, Swift Medicine told him of his portentous night, the white buffalo calf, the owl's feather, and then of the orphaned boy, Wagachun, who had also been visited by a ghostly white animal. He favored this Wapiya Wikasa, Black Cloud, trusted his advice, and felt that he needed to take it. The associations his own mind made with the ones from the spirit world were as loosely woven as a child's first attempt at creating a dream hoop regarding this. He knew what he had to do before the threads unraveled or tangled hopelessly up with daily concerns. He would travel to the center of the world, Paha Safa, and in those black hills he would seek the meaning of a vision, a Handbleceyiya. Convinced that the weather would hold for a few days, he set out to the north, taking a strong mount and no weapons, nor provisions, for this was a sacred journey. Coming up onto the high plains and away from the camp, his mind slowly began to assemble the signs that the spirit world had brought to his attention. Now he must begin to track these very signs. He had achieved the name Swift Medicine due to his acute ability to know what was needed when, and to move quickly toward the telling. Too old now to ride out, his decisions for war parties were still sought as his wisdom sped straight as an arrow. Once so strong in body that he could send an arrow from his bow right through a galloping bull buffalo, he retained his full strength of mind. This was why the confusion that surrounded him now was as troublesome as a thick hatching of flies around the eyes. Irritating. He sought a focused calm here, out on the plains where the buffalo grass and sage were barely peeking through the thinning snow. Here was the place to find it. A few thin little wolves slinking by after the unwary. His old mare knew to watch for the prairie dog holes hidden by the thin snow cover. This was the time to travel in solitude, undisturbed. As he rode, he thought bird, feather, owl, north, buffalo, white, yes, white buffalo, two, mine and the boys, bird, yes, owl, the winter owl he and his son once saw so long ago, the owl's calling, then the feather, and his mind began to drift with pain and sorrow of remembrance, till he jerked it back. Ah, yes, the feather, from a large snow owl, he was sure. Dressed warmly, the cold did not bother him, but the chaos of his mind did. Was he avoiding any portent of his own death? No, he felt awe, but no fear. What would he lose by dying? He had nothing to fear. Black Cloud had talked to him of the importance of buffalo calf women to the people, yet it was not her face he sought. By the time he had arrived in a place he deemed good to set up a sparse camp, darkness was fast falling. Few came to this traditional place of questing for his people at this time of year. Fewer still came alone. Faded, bedraggled strips of cloth, prayer flags, hung from the boughs of the trees, remnants of completed visits here. Nothing stirred. The very bleakness gave it an austere beauty, the gently rolling height rising up out of the surrounding miles and miles of high plain. As one approached, its singular importance became fixed in one's mind. Swift Medicine was no youth embarking on his first vision, though. He knew that this questing wouldn't be in the traditional manner, but would serve more to isolate him so that he could think on this matter. A small fire was set, with some kindling within easy reach. He sat determined to stay awake by focusing on the flames in the darkness until he knew what was being asked of him. Swift Medicine was so absorbed in his thoughts that against all his ways he had failed to notice the very real signs of an approaching squall. The air grew ominously still and quickly cooled. He merely drew his thick robe closer as the first thick clouded flakes of snow began to fall upon him. Neither owl nor buffalo were his power beings. It was the great bear, whose claws he wore around his neck, that showed what animal spirit guided him. But he did not feel its presence speaking to him now. Drawing a small packet out from his robe, he laid the pure white feather before him. Out of the three main kinds the feathered ones have, this kind was the longest, the strongest. Its purpose was to lift, to move forward, to link us to life above. He paused. Should I make a prayer stick with it? That thought passed as he focused on the downy tuft attached to the feather's base. This is where the owl gained its stealth, for these soft feathers hushed its approach in flight. Was there something secretive involved, of slyness, of wary approach? He couldn't imagine. But then he noticed the beauty of its form, and thought of the power of healing. At this thought his heart lurched inside his chest, the pull from those beyond to whom he was still, after all these years, so strongly connected. His breathing slowed, quieted, as the falling snow blanketed his praying form.